Hello, and welcome to the Industrial Growth Lab podcast. I'm Colby Hansen. I'm going to be one of your hosts today. I'm joined by the wonderful Sydney and Kira. I'll let them introduce themselves here in a minute. We're talking all about content. Is content still king? In 2025, specifically for industrial and manufacturing companies. So when we look at traditional content, we're talking about, blogs, white papers, doing keyword optimizations, SEO, things you're probably familiar with if you're listening to this podcast. But if you've had your finger on the pulse in the last couple months or year or so, a lot of that's changing. AI is making big waves in the content space and just the way people search and go throughout the buyer's journey online. So excited to talk about, what role AI and automation should play in alternative strategies to traditional inbound marketing. Sydney and Kira, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Sydney, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I am honored to be part of the podcast. I am a content strategist here at Evenbound. So I work on overarching content strategy for clients. I also write and edit content. And I also just think about how content fits into a larger marketing strategy for our clients. I have about 10 years experience in content. I started out actually in the journalism industry and then have come over into the marketing world. I have a huge passion for storytelling and communicating your business value through words. So I love talking about this sort of thing.
Love it. We're happy to have you. Kira's a repeat guest, so if you listen to some other episodes, you've probably heard her voice before. But for those who are meeting you for the first time, Kira, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Colby. So I'm Kira. I'm the technical project manager at Evenbound. So I am in charge of the HubSpot projects and integration projects. In a past life, I was also in content. I was an SEO copywriter for a few years and worked in content management. So I have a little bit of the best of both worlds here. And it's been interesting to see it evolve and watch our content strategists like Sydney keep up with the evolution.
On this podcast, we like to bring someone with a more strategic background and then someone with a technical background. So Sydney bringing in that strategy and Kira bringing in that technical expertise. And while you obviously both have both skills, I think you really shine in, the strategy and the technical space. So excited to have this conversation. Last little thing before we really dive in, let's get to know each other a little better. So let's do a fun little icebreaker. If you were asked to make a piece of content about something you're passionate about outside of work, what would it be?
I actually did like a project, an independent project in college. That was like a little podcast about women in art history, and I'd focus on a different artist every time, and it was really fun. So that's what I would do.
Love it.
That's a good one. I think I love writing, I love photography, and I love dogs. So I think maybe if I could combine all of those things and do some sort of book that had really high quality pictures of cute dogs and maybe an accompanying story to go with that, that would be my dream. I know Colby also has a golden retriever, so we bond on that. So yeah, something that could combine all of those things.
I feel like that'd be a very well selling book. A lot of people would like that. For me, I love to travel. In the past, I've done this too, but I feel like I would create video content around my trips and my travels. Thank you guys for indulging me in a fun little get to know you question. So let's dive in. Let's focus on our core discussion. I have a handful of questions for you guys, and like I said, really excited to get your take. The first section here we're going to tackle is content still king? So having been in the content space, I know you've all heard the saying content is king. And I think for inbound marketing, that's a pillar. Content is king. But how has the role of content evolved over the last few years, specifically for industrial manufacturing, B2B type of companies?
I think that now industrial companies have to view content as a primary way of engaging their audience. I think in the past, a lot of industrial companies relied very heavily on some traditional tactics. So that might include print advertisements, trade shows. And while those things still have a place and they're still important, I think more and more industrial companies are now realizing that digital content and a robust digital content strategy are really essential to engage your customers and educate them. I think a lot of companies would be surprised at how many people and how much time people are willing to spend consuming content online about your company, product, or service. So I think more and more places are starting to recognize that and starting to really prioritize digital content production.
Technologically, it's also easier than ever to get involved in that space because before there was definitely a barrier of entry. You really needed a dedicated marketing team. You may even need to create your own video content. And now it's with AI and with the tools that we have, such as Canva, that make it really easy to put together quick social media designs or a quick image for a blog. There's really no excuse left. And if we're debating whether content is still king, I'd say yes. Would you say yes, Sydney?
Yeah, I would say yes if you evolve.
Yes, with an asterisk. Which that kind of leads me into my next question, because we've established that content is important. But traditional content strategies, maybe traditional inbound marketing strategies, and by traditional, I'm not talking about that long ago, 5-6 years ago, even 2 years ago, I would say this is still super relevant. But 2024, 2025, things are a little bit different. So what would you say the limitations are if you are solely focusing on content strategies that, kind of the cycle of SEO research, producing blogs, keyword focused content, rinse, repeat?
Yeah, I think the biggest downfall of that is that you're probably missing out on customers, which is kind of the highest level to say it. I think that if you're not looking at the channels where your customers are now spending time and you're not thinking about how they're consuming content, you're going to miss out on reaching them. So if you're not putting in the research to determine which social media channels your audience is spending time, you're going to miss out there. If you're not investing in dynamic content like imagery and videos with your content, you're probably going to miss out on people who want to consume content that way. I also think if you're just relying on traditional SEO tactics and you're just going after keywords as a primary focus for your content, you're going to be missing out on like the authenticity that people crave these days from their content. You want to make sure that your content is value-led and that you're first researching and developing a topic that is genuinely interesting to your audience, and keywords should be a secondary factor to that. And also, if you're only focusing on really high AMS, which is average monthly searches, keywords that a lot of people are searching for. In today's landscape, that's more competitive than ever. Every single company is trying to optimize for those really high AMS terms, especially a lot of really prominent companies. And so it's going to be really difficult for you to rank for those terms. It might have been easier 5-10 years ago when the search landscape was still evolving. But in today's landscape, you should really be looking for long tail keywords that maybe are less competitive, might have a lower AMS, but are more relevant to a niche audience. Those are things that you should be considering in today's world. And if you're just relying on those traditional tactics, you're going to miss out on reaching a big segment of your audience.
Yeah, just to add to different channels, the idea of having these different channels that you've researched and you know your audience is there. Even if you are there, content has been evolving because algorithms have been evolving. And dynamic content like imagery and video is so highly prioritized online right now that you'd be missing out if you didn't create those for your audience.
I feel like those were really helpful answers, and I hope it resonates with people listening that if you're just creating traditional content, if you're just focusing on those high volume monthly searches for keywords and you're just writing blog content and not doing dynamic content, that you're missing out. So when we look at industrial companies, what formats of content do you see, online with clients? What types of content do you see that are resonating more deeply with those, B2B audiences and help companies stand out from the noise that is the internet in 2025?
I'll say, honestly, it's wild the amount of views that some of the really authentic videos get. And by authentic, I mean like it's just somebody's like kind of low quality video of themselves in a facility explaining what goes on. Sometimes those just blow up and they show up on my feed, which is usually full of memes. And then all of a sudden I'm watching a factory video. But it just feeds the algorithm in such a way that it gets spread really easily. Have you seen that, Sydney?
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say video is probably the biggest one. And a lot of industrial companies still see this as emerging. But truthfully, this was emerging, I feel like maybe 5 years ago. And so if it's still emerging to your company, it might be a good sign that you should start evaluating that as an option. And I agree with you, Kira. I think a lot of times companies can get caught up in thinking that they need a really high production video that has a ton of graphics and transitions and different camera angles. And really, what people are seeking today is authenticity, like you said. I think we even see that with the rise of platforms like TikTok. People want real people, they just want to make that human connection. And so I think even if you have your salespeople making really informal videos to talk to prospects, or if you have somebody on your team who's explaining a complex subject in plain language in a video, those are all great things. Even behind the scenes candid videos are awesome. And you can do all of that from your smartphone and you don't have to do anything sophisticated. Something is better than nothing. And I think that's the biggest key here. Don't let your fear of needing high production stop you from doing anything at all, because that's just going to hinder your business. I think other forms of content that are really helpful, obviously, we've talked about social media. I think a lot of industrial companies can ignore that. There can be kind of an old school mindset that social media is not important and that their customers do not live on those platforms. And that is just not true. There might be specific platforms that they spend more time on than others, and you should kind of do that research to figure that out. But I think that this can be a really ignored channel, or it can be a promotion heavy channel where you're just selling your products. You're doing really sales focused posts about like a machine that you sell or a part that you sell. And customers don't really want that on social media. The vast majority of your customers are not ready to buy. And so if you can provide really genuine value-led content that is relevant to them over time, you'll build trust with them. And when they are ready to buy, they will think of your company. And then finally, interactive tools I think are important because customers largely navigate the buyer's journey independently these days. And so if you can have an ROI calculator or a pricing estimator or something of that sort where people can go, they can fill in their information and just get an idea of what something costs, that's going to go a long way. It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that can help people navigate the buyer's journey as well.
Interactive tools are really important because so many people just do not want to pick up the phone now.
And pricing can feel so taboo for some companies. I think a lot of times we're hesitant to be upfront about how much our product or service costs, or it can vary based on what the customer needs, but that should not hold you back. It's okay to give a range or to give an estimate or an idea. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you can still encourage people to reach out. But Kira's so right. People do not really want to talk to salespeople early in the process. Usually people are coming to salespeople once they've pretty much made a decision that they want to buy. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think those are all important tactics for creating content. It was something you had said, Sydney. It made me think of a fun example for social. Again, industrial manufacturing companies thinking like, oh, we don't need to be on TikTok or Instagram, which is, you might not need to be there, but like LinkedIn, Reddit, like Facebook, are your customers spending time there? I think a great example of creating a human connection on social is actually HubSpot. So we're obviously big HubSpot fans here at Evenbound, but they're a B2B software company. If you were to go look at their LinkedIn or their Instagram, like you would get that. But the first thing I think you would notice is like how much they infuse like humor and authenticity in their content. And I've seen, and I've just read online, like how much that's propelled their online, like their audience and their presence. And it's just goes back to your point, being authentic, being real. You don't always have to be as like funny or quirky as HubSpot is, but I think it's a good case study of like how that has worked for, B2B software companies, not, flashy B2C companies that are, all over TikTok. So just something to be said there.
Yeah. And I think that's how you can stand out in today's market, because I think that when you have a consistent brand voice that people relate to over time and they know what to expect and they can build a relationship with you, that is definitely going to make you stand out. A lot of industrial companies do not have their brand figured out. They don't have a strong brand foundation. Sometimes they feel hesitant to even invest in something like brand because it feels a little bit fluffy, but truly having that in place and making sure your tone and style is consistent and authentic over time on your social channels and on your website and other places, that really makes people resonate with your brand. It makes them remember your brand and recognize your brand, just like how we do with HubSpot. All of us here know that they have a really funny, engaging social media, and that's because they do it consistently and they invest in it. And I think that that's something industrial companies can take away.
Yeah, I'd love if products could speak for themselves and the quality of products could speak for themselves, but that's just not the case today. You have to speak for them, and part of that is creating that strong brand.
Absolutely. I'm going to move us into the topic of AI and content. So, looking at content production and distribution, how do you think industrial companies can use AI to enhance this process while being safe and smart about the use of AI?
Big proponent of AI for research and planning and real content in the end coming from humans. And I see Sydney nodding, so.
Get Sydney's take on that.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think that if you're not using AI in your content creation process, you are missing out. You should be using it. And I agree with Kira that it's great for research, it's great for ideation. It can also be good for a first draft of content if you're willing to put in the work of reviewing it and refining it carefully and adding a human element and also adding like your own fact checking, because again, like the research that a chat GPT generates has to be verified, and from personal experience it's not always accurate. So you should be checking those things, but I do think that it can definitely enhance the process, and if it's paired with a human and it's paired with a strong content strategy, it can definitely level up your content game. I think it can be super powerful when you use it to generate some time savings up front, because then the content strategist or copywriter can spend even more time refining that content and making it really robust and comprehensive. And there are a lot of great tools out there too to help with that.
Well, yeah, let's get into that. What are some tools you recommend for content production and distribution?
I think if you're looking for something that is like free and doesn't have a big barrier to entry, ChatGPT, as much as it's talked about, is a great option because it's really easy to just get started with it. Of course, the quality of what you get is only going to be as good as what you put into it, which I know a lot of people say, but it's true. You have to give it really quality, comprehensive inputs. It's not going to be able to read your mind about a lot of things. So you have to make sure you're giving it that information up front. And then also, I know this might be something Kira will talk about too, but HubSpot's content agent, Breeze Content Agent, is a really great option to explore as well. And this can help you generate blog posts, landing pages, other types of content. And again, it has fields for you to kind of guide you through the process of inputs. So that might be helpful if you're kind of new to using AI tools. It is only for Content Hub Pro or enterprise users though, so keep that in mind. But it can also pull from documents and resources that are already in your CRM to inform its outputs, which is a really cool feature. And it directly puts content right into like a blog post format. So you can kind of bypass copying and pasting and uploading separately. So I think those are two that I would definitely recommend exploring.
Yeah, the content tools in HubSpot are getting really good. And especially when it comes to the content remixing tools, where you kind of put in one piece of content and then it helps you write a podcast or write a social post or basically create a whole ecosystem of posts and content around one piece, which is really great for widening your reach without having to necessarily put in the extra time to come up with all these different variations on your own.
Yeah. And if you have a great piece of content, don't let it just go to waste in one format. You might as well utilize tools like that to repurpose it in other ways.
Yeah, I've played around with the HubSpot podcast tool in the Content Hub, and you would be amazed at like how easy it is to like create an outline, description, title, all of that, and then even to go as far as having an AI voice like be the speaker for your podcast. So like you could be totally hands off, which I consider doing that for this podcast. Like, wow, that'd make my life so easy. But for this podcast, obviously want to bring in some outside voices. But I mean, if you're an industrial company and you've always thought, oh, we have so much knowledge to share about this like niche topic and we just don't have the time to do it or the person to do it, Content Hub could pretty much do it for you. And I'm sure there are other tools, but that's just one I'm familiar with. Okay, as we start to wrap up here, I want to talk about balancing traditional and like modern approaches to content. So in your opinion, is looking into 2025, are we talking about completely replacing traditional strategies or integrating new approaches with existing inbound strategies?
I think integrating is a better way to look at it. I think that there is still value to maybe going to some trade shows that are super relevant to your industry and connecting with people there, doing print ads and publications that people are still reading. I think those things can still be valuable. But you might want to look at like the percentage of your marketing budget that's going toward those things and potentially consider reallocating some of that to digital strategies. The reality is people are just spending more and more time online, and that trend is not going to go the other way. It's only going to continue increasing. So I think if you can look at how you can allocate more time to producing digital content that's engaging, that's complex, that's nuanced, that will show your thought leadership, that maybe includes some expert perspectives, I think that is a really worthwhile endeavor because research shows that people are engaging with human generated content over AI generated content, which again does not mean that you should not use AI. You should still leverage AI for efficiency, but you should also be adding that human element to your content and considering how you can up your content budget to be reaching and engaging with those audiences. But again, you can still include some of those traditional marketing tactics that you're used to. Just make sure that you're balancing it out.
I see traditional marketing tactics here as kind of your home base. You always want to have it. It always needs to be a resource that your audience can go to. You should always have your website with blogs, things you can read, more information about your products. That's your home base. And then from there, you branch out and integrate these other strategies, allocate your budget accordingly. And if you're leveraging AI in the right way, you should be able to have the efficiency to put more money and time into those newer digital tactics.
Yeah, I just from my perspective, sitting in a marketing seat at Evenbound, something we did over the past 6 months is we scaled the amount of like new blogs we're posting. We've cut that in half. But the blogs that we are producing, we're making them more human. We're adding more first-hand examples, more imagery, like graphs. And I think based on our conversation today, that's what people are looking for, and it's important to still have that. But like I said, we cut that in half because we also want time to experiment on LinkedIn and look at other channels that could be effective in terms of generating demand for us. So
a lot of the other content on social or in paid ads or anywhere other than your site is going to lead back to those blogs that you're talking about. And the more authority that those blogs have, so they're longer, they have more detail, there's more information, the more you can use it as that base for those ads, those social posts, those videos that are coming back to your website.
Yeah, quality is definitely better than quantity, I would say, with blogs, because truthfully, AI can generate you a surface level blog. Like it can put something together that is like mediocre and kind of hit some main high level points. But truthfully, what will set you apart is if you add that human element to it and you make something unique that other people and other companies are not already producing. And when people are looking through search results and they find yours and it's much more comprehensive and complex and includes a human element, that's definitely going to stand apart to them, to Google, everything. So that's definitely the way to go.
I want to give you both the floor one more time. Is there anything, that we didn't get to touch on that you think is an important message for people here, or just any final piece of advice or your thoughts on content? Is content still king in 2025 or queen?
content is definitely queen and king still in 2025 if you do it the right way. Don't just rely on AI. I think that's my biggest tip. A lot of CEOs and especially high level executives, I think, are excited about the efficiency of AI, which they should be. But I think you do need to balance it with the human element and not just rely on that, because everybody can use those tools and everybody can produce surface level content. So challenge yourself to go a little bit deeper than just using surface level AI content and put your own touch on it.
I've said this in another one of our podcasts about AI, but I'll say it again. And it kind of echoes what Sydney said, but set rules around your AI usage so everyone is on the same page about what you're using it for and what you're not using it for, so that you're creating the kind of content that you really want that still has enough of the human element that will make it popular.
I love that. I think it's interesting that you both chose your final takeaway or your final piece of advice to be AI related. So I think that is telling about, where we're headed in 2025 and, what we've seen in 2024 in terms of AI production and content. That was a great conversation. I think we got really deep and really specific. So I hope everyone listening took something away from this episode. If you want to stay in the loop with all things, industrial marketing or marketing and growth for industrial companies, find Sydney, Kira, myself, and Evenbound on LinkedIn for, timely resources. And I know we all post some pretty good content on there ourselves. So definitely check that out. Subscribe to the podcast and share your favorite content strategies and maybe what you think content will look like in 2025. All right. Thanks for listening and have a great day.